The station's medical bay had seen its share of emergencies, but nothing quite like this. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the entrance, watching the chaos inside with tired eyes. 3 Velcarin cubs huddled in the far corner, their gray fur matted with dried blood that wasn't theirs. Their small bodies shook with each breath, and their large golden eyes darted around the room, tracking every movement, every shadow. The cubs' parents were gone. The pirate attack had been swift and brutal. The merchant vessel had been torn apart in minutes, and by the time the human patrol ship arrived, only these 3 small lives remained, trapped in an escape pod that had barely held together long enough to be recovered. Sarah had been on duty for 16 hours straight. Her feet ached, her back screamed for rest, and her eyes burned from the bright medical lights. But she couldn't leave. Not yet. Not when those cubs looked at her with such raw fear. Commander Reichel, a Brontian with thick-scaled skin and no patience for what he called emotional complications, had already filed his report. The cubs would be transferred to a Velcaran colony ship in 3 days. Until then, they were medical cases, numbers in a system, problems to be managed. But Sarah saw something different. She saw 3 children who had watched their world end. The other medical staff had tried everything. They'd offered food, water, blankets. They'd spoken in soft voices and moved slowly. Nothing worked. The cubs wouldn't eat. They wouldn't drink. They just pressed themselves against the wall and trembled. "They're going to die if they don't eat," Nurse Thomas had said, his voice tight with frustration. "We can't force-feed them. Their biology is too delicate. Stress could kill them faster than starvation." Sarah knew he was right. Velcarans were pack creatures, deeply social, deeply dependent on family bonds. These cubs had lost everything. Their parents, their ship, their entire sense of safety had been ripped away in moments of fire and screaming metal. She dismissed the rest of the medical staff. They needed rest, and crowding the room only made the cubs more frightened. When the door slid shut and she was alone with them, Sarah sat down on the floor. Not on a chair, not on the examination table. On the cold metal floor, 10 feet away from the cubs, her back against the wall. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She just sat there, breathing slowly, letting them see that she posed no threat. An hour passed, then 2. Her legs went numb. Her stomach growled. She ignored it all. One of the cubs, the smallest one with a notch missing from her left ear, finally stopped shaking long enough to study Sarah more carefully. The cub's nose twitched, taking in Sarah's scent. Humans smelled different from any species the cubs had ever encountered. Not threatening, exactly. Just strange. Alien. Sarah kept her eyes half closed, her posture relaxed. She'd read everything the medical database had on Velcaran psychology. They responded to calm energy, to patience, to the absence of aggression. Slowly, very slowly, she reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a ration bar. She broke off a small piece, chewed it slowly, then set the rest on the floor beside her. Not offering it, not pushing it toward them, just leaving it there. The cubs watched. Their ears, large and expressive, swiveled forward slightly. Sarah pulled out her datapad and began reading, her voice barely above a whisper. She read reports, supply manifests, anything that didn't matter. The content wasn't important. The sound was what counted. A steady, calm, boring human voice that promised nothing but continued existence. 3 more hours passed. The station's artificial night cycle began, and the medical bay lights automatically dimmed to evening levels. The sudden change made the cubs flinch, but Sarah didn't react. She just kept reading, her voice a quiet drone in the semi-darkness. The smallest cub moved first, just an inch, then another. Her siblings watched her with wide eyes, their fear mixed with desperate curiosity. Velcarans were curious by nature. Even trauma couldn't completely suppress that instinct. Sarah kept reading. She turned a page on her datapad. She stretched her neck slowly, rolling her shoulders to work out the stiffness. The cub moved closer. 3 feet away now. Close enough that Sarah could see the complex patterns in her fur, the way her whiskers trembled with each breath. Sarah finished her report and set the datapad down. She pulled off her shoes, wincing as her feet finally got relief from the tight military boots. She wiggled her toes, stretched her legs out in front of her. The cubs all stared at her feet. Humans had strange feet, not like Velcaran paws with their retractable claws and padded undersides. Human feet were vulnerable, soft, oddly shaped. Sarah closed her eyes. Not sleeping, just resting, showing the cubs that she felt safe here. That this space held no danger. The smallest cub crept forward again, 4 feet away, 3. She stretched her neck out, her nose working overtime, trying to understand this strange creature who sat so still and asked for nothing. Sarah breathed slowly, in, out, in, out. The cub touched Sarah's foot with one paw. Just a tap, quick and light, ready to bolt at any sign of threat. Sarah didn't move, didn't even open her eyes. The cub grew bolder. She sniffed Sarah's ankle, then moved around to investigate the discarded boots. They smelled like human, like work, like the strange metal corridors of the station, but they also smelled like something else, like consistency, like something that had been worn day after day after day, like routine, like normalcy. The cub's siblings watched this exploration with intense focus. When nothing bad happened, when the human didn't grab or strike or shout, they began to creep forward too. Sarah felt them moving closer. Every instinct screamed at her to look, to check, to make sure they were okay. She forced herself to stay still. This wasn't about her needs. It was about theirs. One of the cubs, the largest with a distinctive white patch on his chest, approached the ration bar she'd left on the floor. He sniffed it carefully, then took a tiny bite. The taste was strange, nothing like Velcaran food, but it was nourishment. His stomach, empty for too long, demanded more. He ate another piece, then another. His siblings saw him eating and rushed over. Within minutes, the ration bar was gone. Sarah slowly reached into her pocket and pulled out 2 more, setting them on the floor without looking directly at the cubs. They devoured those too. When the food was gone, the cubs faced a choice. They could return to their corner, to the cold wall and the safety of isolation, or they could stay here, near this strange human who had given them food and asked for nothing in return. The smallest cub made the decision first. She circled once, twice, like dogs did in ancient Earth videos, then curled up against Sarah's feet. The warmth of the human's body, the steady rhythm of her breathing, the simple presence of another living being who wasn't trying to hurt her, it all combined into something the cub desperately needed. Safety. Her siblings followed. The large male pressed against her other foot, and the middle cub, a female with perfectly symmetrical markings, wedged herself between Sarah's ankles. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes but didn't let them fall. Slowly, carefully, she opened her eyes and looked down at the 3 small bodies curled around her feet. Their breathing had changed. Deeper now. Steadier. The constant trembling had stopped. She reached for a blanket on a nearby chair, moving so slowly that it took her 2 full minutes to complete the action. She draped it gently over the cubs, covering them without touching them directly, giving them warmth without intrusion. The cubs didn't wake. They shifted slightly, pressing closer together, pressing closer to Sarah's feet. The medical bay's lights finished their dimming cycle, leaving only the soft emergency strips along the floor to provide illumination. In the near darkness, Sarah finally allowed herself to relax. Her back still hurt. Her feet were still sore. But none of that mattered. She pulled out her datapad and sent a message to Commander Reichel. It was brief and to the point. The cubs were stable. They were eating. They were sleeping. She would remain with them through the night. He could file whatever reports he wanted. She wasn't leaving. His response came back quickly. A single word. Understood. Sarah smiled slightly. The commander was gruff and by the book, but he wasn't heartless. He knew what she was doing. He knew why it mattered. She set the datapad aside and leaned her head back against the wall. Through the viewport, she could see the stars, endless and cold and beautiful. Somewhere out there, the Velcaran colony ship was traveling toward them. In 3 days, these cubs would be reunited with their own kind. They would be given new families, new homes, new chances at life. But tonight, in this quiet medical bay, they had what they needed most. They had warmth, they had food, they had safety, and they had a human woman who understood that sometimes healing wasn't about medicine or technology or advanced procedures. Sometimes healing was about sitting on a cold floor until your legs went numb, about giving without expectation, about being present when every instinct screamed at you to do something, anything more. The cubs slept on, curled beside Sarah's shoes, their small bodies finally at peace. Sarah kept watch through the night, guardian of 3 small lives that the universe had tried to extinguish. The universe had failed. Humanity wouldn't let it succeed.